She didn't become a monster overnight. That's the part nobody wants to admit. Daenerys Targaryen, the woman half the world called a liberator, burned a city full of innocent people. And when the flames died down, she stood before her army and called it freedom. Here's the question that's been eating at fans for years. Was she always going to end up there? Or did we watch something that should never have break? By the time this is over, you won't just have an answer. You'll understand exactly how it happened, step by step, loss by loss. Game of Thrones ran from 2011 to 2019. 8 seasons, 73 episodes. And at its peak, it was pulling over 17 million viewers per episode in the United States alone, a number that hadn't been seen on cable television since The Sopranos. But ratings don't explain the obsession. What explained the obsession was the characters, specifically one. She appeared in the very first episode as a girl with no power, no allies, and no future she'd chosen for herself. Her brother Viserys, arrogant, delusional, dangerous, had arranged her marriage to Khal Drogo, the most feared warlord in the known world. The price for that marriage was an army. The item being sold was his sister. She was 17. And yet, within 3 seasons, she had dismantled 3 slave empires, hatched 3 dragons from stone eggs, and built an army that answered to no one but her. That transformation, from property to conqueror, is one of the most compelling character arcs in the history of serialized television. But here's the detail that almost nobody caught at the time. In George R.R. Martin's novels, Daenerys is described as a child who dreamed of fire and blood long before tragedy ever touched her. Not as a nightmare, as a comfort. The dreams weren't born from trauma. They came first. The trauma just gave her permission to follow them. Hold that thought. We'll come back to it. Let's be precise about why people loved her. Because vague answers won't do this justice. She earned love the hard way, through specific, costly choices, in scenes you could actually point to. The first one came in Season 1. Khal Drogo's riders had raided a Lazarene village, slaughtering men, taking women. Daenerys intervened. She placed herself between the captive women and the warriors who outranked her. She had no political authority to do it. She did it anyway. She didn't make a speech. She didn't explain herself. She just acted and dared anyone to challenge it. That moment told you this is not a character who waits for permission. Then came the dragons, 3 eggs placed on a funeral pyre. Everyone assumed they were decorative, dead stone. She walked into the fire. She walked out holding life. Drogon, regal, Viserion, named for people she'd lost, her husband, her brother, and her family name. She didn't name them for power. She named them for grief. That's the detail that makes you love her, not the dragons, the names. And then came Slaver's Bay, and this is where casual viewers thought they understood the story, while the show was quietly setting a trap. A stapper. Yunkai, Meereen, 3 cities. 3 broken systems. She walked into each one and tore them apart with surgical precision. In a stapper, she traded one of her dragons for 8,000 unsullied soldiers. Elite. Obedient. Unstoppable. The moment the exchange was complete, she gave the dragon a single command in Valyrian, Dracarys, and watched it burn the slave master alive. Then she turned to the unsullied and freed them, every single one. No chains, just a choice. Most of them chose to stay. That's important. They didn't follow her because they had to. They followed her because she gave them a reason to. The Mhysa scene, where thousands of freed people lifted her above their heads and chanted "Mother" in their own language, is still one of the most emotionally overwhelming scenes the show ever produced. You felt the weight of it. You felt what was possible. Tyrion Lannister believed in that possibility. And here's why that matters more than anything else. Tyrion was the show's clearest moral compass. He was brilliant and broken and deeply cynical about power. He had watched his own family's cruelty for decades. He didn't trust easily. He didn't follow easily. He followed her. And Missandei, the woman standing beside Daenerys in that thumbnail with the halo, had been enslaved since she was 5 years old. She spoke 19 languages. She could have used that gift to survive anywhere. She stayed with Daenerys not because she had no options, but because she believed the mission was real. When the people closest to a character believe in them, the audience believes too. That was the architecture of the love, and it was genuine. Every brick of it was earned. Now here's where the script flips, not because Daenerys changed, Because you were always supposed to see this, and most people didn't. The crucifixions happened in Season 4. After liberating Meereen, she learned that 163 slave children had been nailed to mile markers along the road into the city, killed by the ruling class as a warning. She responded by crucifying 163 slave masters, one for each child, mirror justice. She called it justice. Her advisor, Sir Barristan Selmy, a man who had served 3 kings and understood the difference between justice and vengeance, pulled her aside. He told her some of the men she'd crucified may not have participated in the killings. That evidence was incomplete. That public executions without trials had a name, and it wasn't justice. She heard him, she nodded. She crucified them anyway. That's not a hero's response. That's the response of someone who has already decided that the scale of her cause justifies the precision of her methods, and she'd convince herself of that again and again. Each time the numbers went up. Season 7, The Field of Fire, Part 2. Her dragons routed the Lannister army in open battle, one of the most spectacular military victories in the show's history. The survivors knelt, all but 2. Lord Randall Tarly and his son Dickon refused to bend the knee. On principle, on pride, Tyrion asked her to take them prisoner, to give them time, to be strategic. She listened carefully. Then she had Drogon burn them both alive right there in front of the surviving soldiers. No trial, no mercy, no discussion. Tyrion walked away shaken. Not because the men didn't deserve punishment, they'd fought against her, but because of the method, the speed, the absolute absence of hesitation. She hadn't struggled with the decision. That was the problem. There's a psychological term for what the show was depicting, and it's not madness, which is what most viewers assumed. It's something more subtle. It's what researchers call moral licensing. The belief that enough good acts on your account give you the right to commit acts you'd otherwise condemn. Daenerys had a very large account, and she spent it freely. But 3 events were coming, and once they arrived, they would drain that account completely. 3 losses, in sequence, each one removing something she could not replace. The first, Viserion. Beyond the wall, she flew with 3 dragons to save Jon Snow's group from the army of the dead. The Night King, cold, ancient, silent, watched from the ice below. He waited. He chose his moment, and then he threw an ice spear through the sky with a precision that should not have been possible. Viserion fell into the frozen lake, slowly. The way things fall when they're very large and the world is fighting to keep them. She didn't scream. Emilia Clarke made a choice in that moment. No tears, no collapse, just stillness. The kind of stillness that happens when something inside stops. One of her children was gone, the first thing she'd ever created that was entirely her own. The second, Missandei. Cersei's forces captured Missandei during the siege of Dragonstone. They brought her to the ramparts of King's Landing. Daenerys arrived to negotiate. Cersei didn't negotiate. Missandei, 5 years enslaved as a child, a decade spent building something worth building, was executed in front of everyone who loved her. In chains, in public. By a queen who did it purely to wound. Her last word was Dracarys, not a plea, not a farewell, a command. She was dying and she used her last breath to tell Daenerys, burn it, burn all of it. That word from the person who most humanized her became the thing that finally broke her open. The third, Jon Snow's secret. Jon was Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar. Born with a stronger claim to the Iron Throne than Daenerys. She'd known this for weeks and asked him, begged him not to tell anyone. He told his family. The information spread. And suddenly the North, the people who'd fought beside her, whose home she'd defended, looked at her differently. Not with admiration, with calculation. They were deciding if she was necessary anymore. She had given everything to this war. She had crossed the world. She had lost a child and a best friend. And now the man she loved had taken the last thing she had left. The certainty that this was her story to finish. 3 losses, 3 cuts. And the thing those losses had in common, Viserion, Missandei, Jon's loyalty, was that they were the 3 forces that made her human. The dragons grounded her love. Missandei grounded her conscience. Jon grounded her heart. All gone, what was left was just the fire, and the mission, and the absolute conviction that she was right. Season 8, Episode 5. The Bells, written by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. It aired on May 12, 2019. By May 13, it had become the most divisive single episode of television in a decade. The battle was over before it ended. Daenerys' forces had broken through every defensive line. The Golden Company was shattered. The city's bells were ringing, the signal for surrender. Cersei's commanders had laid down their weapons. By every rule of warfare, by every moral standard of the world the show had built, the killing should have stopped. Soldiers throwing their weapons down, it didn't matter. Drogon's fire doesn't distinguish. It doesn't care about rank or guilt or innocence. It just burns. She flew street by street, systematically. The way someone burns a document they've decided no longer needs to exist. When the ash settled, tens of thousands of people were dead. People who had never made a political choice in their lives. People who had spent 8 seasons as background, as the small folk. The phrase the show used to remind you they were real. She killed them all. And then she walked out of the ash and gave a speech about liberation. That's the scene that broke the audience in two, permanently. Half of them felt betrayed by the writing. Half of them felt they'd been watching this coming for 8 years and couldn't believe anyone was surprised. Here is the honest answer. Both groups were right about the outcome. Only one of them was right about the journey. The darkness was always there. The show planted it in season 1. It fertilized it in seasons 3 and 4. It let it grow through 5, 6, and 7. The only thing that changed in season 8 was that the last 3 things holding it back were removed, one by one, with surgical cruelty. Compare her to the Night King who stands behind her in that thumbnail with those dead blue eyes. He was destruction without ideology. No grief, no conviction, no history. He just ended things. Compare her to Cersei with the devil horns, who was honest about her selfishness in a way Daenerys never could be. Cersei wanted power. She said so. She protected her children. She knew exactly what she was. Daenerys genuinely believed she was saving the world. That's what makes her the most disturbing figure in the show's entire roster, not the body count, the sincerity. So here is the question the thumbnail is actually asking. Not was she good or evil? That's too simple. The real question is, how does a person who is genuinely, provably good become this? George R.R. Martin has given interviews over the years where he's been clear. The tragedy of Daenerys was always the destination. The word he uses is bittersweet. He said that readers of the books will eventually watch a character they love make a choice they can't forgive, and that this is the point. That great power and great conviction, without the friction of people who love you enough to slow you down, produces catastrophe. The show rushed it. Season 8 had 6 episodes where it needed 12. The compression is real, and it's the legitimate source of the fan outrage. Not the arc, the pacing, but the arc itself. Martin always intended it. Now look at Tyrion, Halo in the thumbnail, through this lens. He spent seasons convincing himself that her instincts, combined with his restraint, would produce something functional. He told himself he was the brake on the engine, and for a while he was right. But there came a point where the engine was moving too fast for brakes, and Tyrion missed that point. Not because he was stupid, he's the smartest character in the show. Because he needed to believe in something. He'd given up his family, his country, his reputation. Daenerys was the last thing he believed in. People will rationalize almost anything to preserve the last thing they believe in. That's Tyrion's tragedy. Not that he was wrong about her, he was right about what she could be. But he stayed too long. And his silence in the moments that mattered most made him complicit in every stone that fell. And Missandei, look at her Halo now. She was the truest believer of all. She saw a version of Daenerys that no one else saw so clearly, a woman whose mission was real, who had genuinely changed lives, who deserved the loyalty she inspired. That version existed. That was never a lie, but Missandei died before the version that came after. And her last word, Dracarys, was given to a woman who no longer had enough anchors left to know when to stop. That last word wasn't instruction, it was love, blind, loyal, devastating love, and the throne. When Drogon melted the Iron Throne, not in rage, not to destroy something evil, but seemingly in grief. As if it understood what had killed her, that image became the final thesis statement of the entire show. The throne was the problem, not Daenerys, not Cersei, not any single monarch. The system that required a single person to sit at the center of everything, to hold together a continent by sheer force of will and the threat of violence. That system always ends this way. Daenerys didn't fall because she was mad. She fell because the system she was trying to inherit was designed to destroy whoever sat in it, the wheel she said she wanted to break. She became its final, most spectacular casualty. You came here with a split screen in your head, the Halo version and the Fire version. And the honest answer is, both of those people were always the same person. The woman who freed the Unsullied and the woman who burned King's Landing, same hands, same face, same conviction that she was right. The only difference was what was left to slow her down. People loved Daenerys because she was real about what it costs to fight for something. She paid, she bled, she lost people who mattered, she showed you what genuine sacrifice looks like. People fear what she became because she showed you something else. What genuine sacrifice looks like when it strips away everything that made you human and leaves only the mission. The most frightening thing about Daenerys Targaryen isn't the dragonfire, it's that she never stopped caring. She cared to the end. She cared when she gave the order. She cared when she made the speech in the ash. She cared, and the caring wasn't enough to stop her. That's not a fantasy story. That's the story of every ideology that ever burned something it claimed to love. If you want to go one level deeper, the next video breaks down Cersei Lannister, not as a villain. As the character who, arguably, understood the game better than anyone and still couldn't survive it. That breakdown is going to reframe everything you thought you knew about Season 8. Subscribe if stories like this are what you're here for. One character, every layer, every week. The Game of Thrones never ends, it just changes who it destroys.